Hello and welcome to the WRAP, WRAL's weekly look at North Carolina politics. I'm Travis Fain.
And I'm Will Doran.
And we are part of the state government team here at WRAL, bringing you all the news we can. Medicaid expansion, Will. It got signed into law. It's incredible. There was a big to-do at the governor's mansion, all the Republican leaders and Democratic leaders all there just so happy to be together, Will.
Big kumbaya session.
Yeah, and this extends taxpayer-funded health care to hundreds of thousands of people, kind of the working poor, basically, in North Carolina. There is a catch that we'll get to in a minute. There was some concern at the event that it might have been a little premature, but everybody seemed really happy. This is the longest I've ever seen Governor Roy Cooper linger at one of these events. I mean, it probably his top priority his entire time in office, right?
Yeah, I mean, he came into office immediately, tried expanding Medicaid on his own, which he was unable to do because the legislature had actually passed a law specifically banning him from being able to do that. Governors in other states can do it, but not here. He fought a court battle against the legislature over this, lost, his vetoed state budgets. I mean, he's put a ton of political capital and literal capital into this fight. Republicans spent years really doggedly stopping it from happening. And then, just within the last couple of years have had this change of heart here.
Yeah, just like that. And it passed final passage kind of the week before, and then Monday was the signing ceremony. And I don't know how many folks have been to one of these signing ceremonies before, but, the governor signs almost each letter of his name with a different pen so that you can hand out the pens, because it's kind of cool. Like, I got the pen that signed the bill. Those pens haven't been given out yet. They weren't given out at the ceremony. And I'm wondering, and again, we'll get to this in a minute, if the governor is waiting to see a state budget pass, which has to before Medicaid expansion actually takes effect, to decide who gets
a pen.
Who gets a pen. Before we get to that, though, so we went from kumbaya on Medicaid Monday to on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, an exercise in raw legislative power in the veto override for Senate Bill 41, which is a gun bill, and primarily what it does is get rid of scrap the pistol permit system. So you no longer, as of right now, you do not have to go and ask your sheriff for permission to buy a handgun. You just go and buy it like you would a rifle, get the federal background check at the store, and 3 absences are the reason that the governor's veto on that bill was overturned, right?
Yeah, no Democrats voted to override it. They just weren't there for the vote.
Yeah, and so in legislative parlance, we call this taking a walk, because it changes the math, right? To overturn the governor's veto, you need 3/5 of all members present and voting. So if you're not present and you're not voting, you don't count. And so Republicans, instead of needing one Democrat to come with them because they're that close to a supermajority in the House of Representatives, they didn't need any Democrats. They just needed them to not be there. So the 3 that weren't there, Tricia Cotham, Cecil Brockman, and Representative Ray. We don't know where Representative Ray was. He had never responded. Cotham says she has long COVID, which we've heard about before, and that she had an appointment. And then Brockman was at an urgent care. He said had some sort of situation where he needed to go to an urgent care. But it made a pretty big difference. It made Democrats pretty mad too.
Democrats were very mad, especially because Representative Marvin Lucas came in on a broken leg, I believe, broken foot.
3 bones broken in his ankle. He's 81 years old.
Yeah, and he made it in for that vote. And so some Democrats were pretty upset that some of their younger, more spry members did not make it for that vote.
Not only that, Lucas had someone drive him and delayed a surgery that he needs to have on this broken ankle situation. Our thoughts are with him. I don't know if he's had the surgery, if he's having it soon. It's one of those two things. So, but I mean, certainly we wish him very well and a full recovery. And not only were Democrats mad with a handful of their own party, they're mad at the Republicans because the Republicans cut off debate on this. They did not allow. They were just like, we're done talking about this. We're just going to vote, which happens from time to time. And afterward was the angriest I have ever seen Robert Reeves, who is the House Democratic leader. He is an even-keeled guy. He at the Medicaid thing, he gave a wonderful speech at the signing ceremony about working together and like, look what happens when we can work together. But when the Republicans kind of pull the rug out from under you.
Well, and this was the culmination of, it wasn't just that they didn't let the Democrats talk about this veto override, which we should note happened the day after that school shooting in Nashville, which certainly the Democrats were hoping to talk about if they had been allowed to. But in addition to that, the first time that this came up, the Democrats wanted to run a bunch of amendments on this bill to do things like universal background checks, to do red flag laws for mental health issues, so judges can take away guns from people who are potentially going to shoot up a school.
Mm-hmm.
And normally Republicans will just vote down all of the Democrats' amendments, but this time, presumably because didn't want to put the Republicans in the position of voting against very popular things like universal background checks, Speaker Moore just wouldn't even allow those amendments to be proposed at all. So I think, having that happen first, and then also just stopping Democrats from, even being able to say their piece on this veto override, I think those two things combined were, kind of what really contributed to that anger.
Yep. And once that was in the rearview mirror, kind of all the attention focused on the budget, which emerged Wednesday from House Republicans and will probably pass the House next week. I think Thursday is the final vote on that. So it doesn't take long to spend $30 billion if you really want to. But there's a bunch of policy in there, too, which obviously Republicans expect to make Democrats, including Governor Roy Cooper, swallow in order to get Medicaid expansion, because Medicaid expansion does not take effect until this budget passes. And Will, you and I have got a Sunday story people can go read online at WRAL.com, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. But what are a couple of the changes that Republicans have put into this budget so far? More to come, I promise.
So far. Oh yeah, the Senate hasn't even gotten their hands on it yet. This is just what we've seen from the House. But what they've proposed, there's a lot of stuff on schools there. It expands the private school voucher program. There's some changes for charter schools, and there's also for public schools 2 new rules. Well, there's a bunch of new rules, but 2 that I want to talk about. One that would force schools and teachers to put all of their instructional materials online, and that's their, reading lists, their books, worksheets that they hand out.
It's an expansive list. It's basically everything, yeah.
Everything that a kid, sees in a classroom is, going to be required to be posted online. And then the very next part of the budget kind of streamlines the process for parents to be able to challenge books and all of these other materials as being unfit for children. And so basically just and Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, there's already a system in place, at least in most school boards around
so
the
it's
state.
kind of district by district now, and it's not as formalized. This creates basically appointed boards in all 100 counties that would look at these issues when parents challenge something. And ultimately, it can be appealed all the way to the State Board of Education if the parent chooses.
Yeah. So, you've got the education piece of it. There's some kind of anti-environmental language in the budget, banning cap and trade, which was a priority of Cooper's. He signed an executive order for that. There's some stuff on abortion, millions of dollars for, various kind of religious charities that operate in the crisis pregnancy center sphere, which, we've seen that in past budgets.
Yep.
But, there's still a lot in this budget. There is plenty more. What else stuck out to you, Travis?
One thing that's not in there is no abortion regulation.
That's true. I should mention that, yeah.
That's something that, and I mean, who knows, could emerge later, but I'm guessing won't. I think that'll be a separate bill. But, I mean, we just don't know what all else is going to get added to this. It certainly wouldn't surprise me, at least, if late in the process, some more things, more policy that the governor and Democrats aren't going to like gets added to this thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sense in tipping your hand too early with this initial draft when we know that, it's going to be months before we really get an actual final budget.
Yeah, and one thing almost certainly coming from the Senate, because they announced a separate bill on it this week, is an increase in the state's Opportunity Scholarship Program, which is our name for private school vouchers. They want to add $1.3 billion to that over 7 years. And that's beyond kind of already escalating annual funding. It's already built to go up $15 million a year. This would become a $500 million annual program by the end of those 7 years, and it would be open to everybody. Like if you were really rich, you could still get this voucher for your kid. You couldn't get as much as someone because it sets up a tiered system. But right now there's a cap, an income cap, and then we would get rid of the income cap with that. Yeah. Also not in there, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the $1.8 billion sweetener. That's the federal money that we get to expand Medicaid. Weren't you telling me, Will, that that's not accounted for in this House budget and is probably going to be, that's something they're going to deal with later?
That is still an open question. Yeah, I mean, we know a big reason why Republicans came around on Medicaid expansion at all was this $1.8 billion that the feds gave us to basically just say, here, do whatever you want with this. There's no, time limit to spend it. There's no list of things that you have to spend it on or can't spend it on. It's just, as much as it can be free $1.8 billion. Thanks taxpayers from the rest of the country for
we appreciate it. Yeah.
for giving us that money. This initial version of the budget we saw does draw down a little bit of that, but it's a small percentage. It's for there's some grants for school safety, for instance, that use some of the Medicaid money, but for the most part, that money is not there. And the big question seems to be, are we going to use it immediately for mental health care?
As the governor wants. He wants like $1 billion of it for mental health.
The governor wants that, and also a top Republican budget writer, Donnie Lambeth, wants that. There's some bipartisan agreement that, we should be using this on mental health care. But talk to some other Republican leaders, and they'll say, well, we might be seeing a recession coming up. It might make more sense to just kind of squirrel this away, in case, because also they're continuing on with more tax cuts as well. So if a recession does hit, that extra $1 billion or so could be handy to have, in our back pocket.
Yeah. Another thing not in there is the $300 million that the governor wants in child care grants. This kind of helps boost salaries at daycares and preschools because it's really hard right now to kind of thread the needle, daycare owners say, to pay people enough to have them work there instead of, say, Target or Starbucks, but also not pay them so much that parents cannot afford to send their kids to daycare. So that's also something that House budget writer Donnie Lambeth had supported and did not make it into the final cut. I think some of that is going to come back in, but maybe not the full $300 million. I'll note real quickly, our colleague Brian Murphy tweeted about this. The House budget press conference on Wednesday. I mean, I guess you and I don't have a leg to stand on here, but it was all white dudes, just all white guys, just up at that podium, which Brian Murphy again mentioned in a tweet because it struck him just looking at them. And then I went and looked at the budget chairs. 2 of the 29 House budget chairs are women. That's stark. Yeah. None of the main appropriations chairs, which has 10 different chairs, are women. No minorities in any of these positions that I know of. So make of that what you will, folks.
It's, a trend that we've seen for a long time.
The ICE bill, immigration. So this is a bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't written much about it, but I believe you have to inform immigration authorities within 48 hours if a sheriff takes someone into custody whose citizenship is in question. Is that roughly? I mean, basically, it commands sheriffs across the state to work more closely with federal immigration officials.
Yes, and a big part of this is not, and especially the controversial part of this, is not necessarily the that's obviously a big part, telling ICE, hey, I've got this person here who might be someone you want to deport. You should come check it out. But then really where you kind of get into the tricky legal and constitutional issues are, then the jails could also be forced to hold on to those people, even if, say, their charges get dismissed. The prosecutor says, oh, hey, this person didn't actually commit a crime, or we're dropping the charges, or maybe they post bail, maybe it's something very minor. They get, they bond out. The sheriff would still be required to keep them in jail, even though they've been told to be let out. So, so that ICE can show up. And, who knows how long it's going to take ICE to come and find these people. There's been lawsuits in plenty of places about, people being, improperly kept behind bars for a very long time because of these programs.
And this is a bill that the governor has vetoed before. This time through the legislature, though, 3 Democrats voted for it. And tell me if y'all sense a theme here. It's Cecil Brockman, Tricia Cotham, and Representative Michael Ray.
I've heard those names before, I think earlier in this podcast.
Right. The same 3 who took a walk, or I should not say that, who were not there. They had excused absences and were not there for the gun bill override. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. This bill, there was a really powerful speech, I thought, until a Republican stood up and tried to cut it off, from Representative Cervania here in Wake County about how she was pulled over by a deputy. And I don't remember, I don't know her dissent. But I mean, basically, this deputy was questioning her, whether she was an American or not.
Yeah, he was accusing her of lying about being a citizen. She's showed him her license or whatever, and he's like, I think this is fake, and that I'm going to deport you.
Yeah, I mean, the way the story was told, it was disturbing. And maybe I should follow up with her, because it seems like that deputy should have been investigated, because she said she was on the side of the road with him for 3 hours. And that was part of her argument against this bill. Some sheriffs like the bill, that say they're already working with ICE, so that they don't have to be told. But a number of Democratic sheriffs say this erodes trust in immigrant communities, and we need those people to tell us when there's a crime. And so we don't want them to think we're going to call federal immigration on them and try to get them deported. So gambling.
We're just hitting all the non-controversial topics today, aren't we?
The gambling bill passed the House. It's on to the Senate. That's all I'm going to say. I'm done talking about these gambling bills. I mean, it's just amendment after amendment. Poor Murph, our colleague Brian Murphy's written about it 1,000 times.
If y'all are interested in sports betting and the whole regime that we're setting up for it in North Carolina, definitely check out Brian's stories. He knows more about this topic than I would say all but maybe half a dozen state lawmakers. There's probably 6 or 7 who know more than Brian does about this, but the rest of them, I'd probably put my money on Brian if I were a betting man.
On Tuesday, there was a hearing, a House oversight hearing. They had the director of the State Bureau of Investigation there. And then the very next day after that hearing, the budget comes out, and the SBI is going to move under the House budget from DPS, the Department of Public Safety, up to a cabinet level office, and it would also have more authority, the budget does, for the SBI director to hire political appointees. Sometimes you hear those called exempt hires, where you can basically hire and fire someone at will, and it's basically a political opponent. A political appointment. I don't know why I can't talk
patronage.
Bob Schermeyer is the SBI director, and at that hearing, he was basically saying that Governor Roy Cooper's administration is meddling with the SBI. He had to negotiate with them on those appointees instead of being able to hire them himself. This is supposed to be an independent agency, just kind of nominally under the Department of Public Safety. And he also said that he was pressured to resign. But I think there's a little more to that part of the story.
Yeah, this is a really complicated topic that probably is worth its own podcast in the future. So maybe we'll do that at some point.
So the bottom line is, though, someone's accused Schermeyer, the SBI director, of discrimination, some sort of discriminatory hiring practice. And the people in the governor's office are like, hey, this looks like a problem. You might want to toddle off onto that sunset. And he feels like he didn't do anything wrong. So it's a question of either the governor's office put this pressure on him when it shouldn't have, or the governor's office put this pressure on him when it should have. And we do not know. The personnel laws basically block us from knowing what this discrimination accusation is against him. So maybe he's totally innocent, maybe he's not. We have no idea. But anyway, that is playing out in the budget as Republican lawmakers try to kind of get the governor less power over the State Bureau of Investigation, I guess is fair to say.
Yeah, for sure.
We should also note the State Crime Lab would move from under the Department of Justice in this House budget bill to the State Bureau of Investigation. So it would go from being under the Attorney General to under this new cabinet-level State Bureau of Investigation. Will, tell us briefly about these insurance bills that you wrote about this week. Do you even remember writing about these, or does this feel like it was a month and a half ago?
Yeah, things are moving quickly here. This is a good, nice little break from all of the controversy to just talk about development. And, everyone's got, they've heard about the high housing prices that we have here in North Carolina. There's several bills moving forward that are aimed at fixing that. A couple of them would create more affordable housing by basically giving sweetheart deals to developers, letting them ignore some regulations that are on the books. some of them would try to speed up the permitting process to help homes get built more quickly. As you can guess, most of these bills are backed by developers. So, that obviously doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad, but, there are some critics who kind of wonder, okay, well, will these actually fix the problems that they're supposed to be fixing, or is this just, the construction industry helping itself out? But those are moving, and there's going to be a lot more debate on those. We're going to keep following them as they go along. There was another bill that our colleague Laura Leslie, and I think you too, Travis, have covered on drinking and driving. How much you can drink before it becomes driving under the influence. Are we going to change the rules for what is a DWI?
No, we're not going to change that. The Freedom Caucus in the House wants that changed. So kind of the right wing of the Republican Party in the House wants to go from 0.08 down to 0.05. That bill is not going to move according to House, or it's unlikely to move, I guess we should say, according to House leadership. Speaking of not going to move, Keith Kidwell, also part of the Freedom Caucus, filed a abortion bill. I mean, am I correct that it protects? It basically forbids abortion from the moment of conception? Was that
correct?
Okay.
Yeah,
that bill
and criminalizes abortion too. Yeah,
that bill is not going to move either. Speaker of the House Tim Moore was very direct about that. He, in legislative parlance, he said that bill has been assigned to rules, and rules is the place where you go to die as a bill if that's your first committee assignment. It just means it's a holding pattern. So you'll see some coverage, I'm sure, about North Carolina Republicans wanting to do this. Some North Carolina Republicans certainly want to do this, but not enough to make it law. The participation trophy bill, Will, this
is the biggest story of the week.
Why didn't we lead with this? Senators Tim Moffitt, Bobby Hoenig, and Eddie Settle. Basically, it says if you're a local government and you have a sports program, that sports program cannot give out participation trophies. What's the wording, Will? It says something like any trophies have to be based on personal or some sort of achievement.
Yeah, your actual achievement, which, I think, this is just a classic example of, small government political philosophies, the state coming in and telling cities and counties what types of trophies they are and aren't allowed to give out to children.
I haven't talked to Senator Moffitt about this. I bet there's a fun story in it, though. I know Brian Murphy, our colleague we've mentioned, wrote the story about this, and he noted, this is a wonderful sentence in Brian's story, that Moffitt has also proposed legislation this session to allow Polk County to prohibit or restrict the use of skateboards on public streets in the county. So no skateboards.
No trophies.
No participation trophies, dadgummit. The Blue Cross Blue Shield bill, that's House Bill 346, would allow the state's top insurer to create a nonprofit parent holding company that wouldn't be subject to the same level of regulatory scrutiny as the insurance entity is now. Our colleague Laura Leslie wrote about this week on Monday, which that's so long ago.
That was months ago.
So long ago. This is a major bill, though. We've talked about it before. It's going to morph. It is morphing. I don't know what it's going to end up looking like, but this is Blue Cross Blue Shield wanting something from state government, and I'm guessing it's something that would make Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina more money. Is that a fair?
I think that's a pretty good guess, and especially since, there's also the whole, everything with the state health plan that they're embroiled in as well. I think you're going to be hearing their name probably a lot more over the next few years or a few months as we cover this session.
Yeah, keep an eye on House Bill 346. Real quickly here, Dale Folwell announced his campaign for governor. The state treasurer is officially running. He announced it this past Saturday, so right after we recorded our last show. I told me today he's got 6 people on staff, a bunch of volunteers, including 12 chairs. So he is geared up and running, and we'll see how it goes for him.
Yeah, he's certainly, I think, trying to run as more the candidate who's focused on, hey, why don't we elect in the primary someone who has a shot at winning the general election? And, when I talked to him about this, he was careful to note that, so far he's the only candidate who has announced for the GOP primary, but basically everyone expects that Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson is going to jump in as well. And he is very popular with the far right, very controversial with plenty of other people. His statements on LGBTQ people, on Jewish people have raised a lot of questions. And, Falwell was very careful. I tried to press him on this, but he wouldn't even say Robinson's name, let alone, say that, any of his statements were about any specific, potential opponents. But he was just like, look, so it's well and nice for, the party to vote in the primary, but like the main goal is to win a general election. So let's just keep that in mind as we're having our GOP primary next year.
Yeah, Falwell's trying to set up a contest between a bomb thrower and Robinson, and a kind of a dedicated public servant who pushes back against Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, the hospitals. The Falwell calls the hospitals in this state a cartel, which is not all that inaccurate. And he's kind of trying to run a kind of a populist campaign on that. We'll see how it goes. Robinson, by the way, haven't been seeing him in the state Senate. I don't know what he's spending his days doing, but it ain't standing up in front of the state Senate as lieutenant governor. Quickly, John Bradford, state representative out of the Charlotte area, he says he's considering running for treasurer to replace Falwell. I found all these. I shouldn't single Bradford out on this, but it caught me funny. His announcement said, a lot of people have approached me about this, and who are these people? They're never named. Everyone who has ever announced for office has said, well, a lot of people have asked me to do this. Just once, I want someone to say, you know what? No one asked for this. I just want to be governor or treasurer. I just think it's cool. I'm very ambitious.
Yeah. More honesty in politics.
Wesley Harris is running on the Democratic side, Representative Wesley Harris on the Democratic side in that race, the treasurer's race. And I didn't know this, but there's another Republican in it. Well, this is fantastic. His name is James Upchurch. He is a county commissioner in Guilford County. This is from Fox 8 out in Guilford County. He is a High Point business owner who was elected to the Guilford County Board of Commissioners in November 2020 as a Democrat, only to switch parties a year later. He has now announced his bid as a Republican for state treasurer in 2024.
Well, that is an interesting political strategy. We will see how it goes.
Life comes at you fast. One of the things I use to track all this is a spreadsheet that Michael Bitzer, the well-known political scientist out at Catawba College, keeps online. So if you know Bitzer, reach out to him for that. Real quick, Mark Trogdon, retiring after 30 years. He has been the head of fiscal research. He is one of many people behind the scenes that work really hard to make a legislative session possible. I cannot imagine how many long nights over 30 years. Good luck to him in retirement.
Senate Leader Phil Berger, I thought very appropriately also acknowledged his wife and kids during his retirement, and said, look, we're here to thank him, but also thank y'all for your service because, anyone who works at the legislature, whether you're a lawmaker or a staffer or even a lowly journalist, knows that it can take a lot of weird hours to make everything happen.
Charlie Peruse, former budget director for Governor Roy Cooper, has now got a one-man consulting shop called Victory Lane. He was at the Medicaid expansion event Monday. I wanted to mention that. Real quickly on Congressman Patrick McHenry, there was a Bloomberg piece. McHenry is chairman of, is it the Finance and Banking Committee?
Very influential committee in Congress. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're having hearings on these various bank collapses, including the collapse of Signature Bank. But 10 days before Signature Bank collapsed, or before that became public, he was at a fundraiser at Signature Bank. So in their boardroom, this is all according to reporting by Bloomberg. And the campaign told Bloomberg, well, we won't process those donations. But here's what I don't understand. So it's 10 days, the fundraiser is 10 days before the problems happen or at Signature Bank. Donations usually come electronically. They typically come in during an event, before an event, as opposed to after events, some after, but not unusual for them to come in before. So how are they not processed? The campaign, yeah. I've asked them like 3 or 4 times. They just won't say anything. But that's what they told Bloomberg, was that they wouldn't process the donations. They won't talk to me about whether or not, like how I don't wait 10 days to process I wait 10 days to process stuff in my bank account. I can't pay my mortgage.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly gone a few days without, cashing maybe a birthday check, but, something for thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, I'm going straight to the bank with that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's rare that these things are written on checks. So one last thing, David Hoyle died Wednesday. He was 84, former state senator, former revenue commissioner under Governor Bev Perdue. He was he died in Dallas, which is in Gaston County. I did not know this until I read his obituary. He was the mayor of Dallas, North Carolina, in his 20s. That is awfully young to be in the mayor. He spent 9 terms in the state Senate. He was one of Mark Basnight's top lieutenants. He was heavily involved in tax policy, and as I think I mentioned, revenue secretary under Governor Bev Perdue. So thoughts to his family. David Hoyle, dead at 84 this week. That's all I've got, Will.
That's a wrap.
We have we should have ended the show there. Dadgummit. If only I knew how to edit, Will. Say it again.
That's a wrap.